All right, so some of you know me, some of you don't know me. My name's Ken Frazier. I'm typically the guy behind the camera, but today I'm going to be doing a message for you. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of information, let you know who I am, because I'm not one that actually talks a lot, so you can tell I'm a little nervous with my hands, so bear with me. So I've lived in Florida most of my life. When I was in middle school, my parents moved to the backwoods of Kissimmee. So, you know, Disney is actually Kissimmee, not Orlando. Backwoods of Kissimmee. So we had horses, chickens, and only a few neighbors. Our closest neighbor was like a 5-minute walk. So my dad was a mechanic and a handyman. That's where I learned a lot of my practical knowledge. My mom was a Catholic. She's actually a Christian. Well, Catholic is a Christian. It's just a type of Christian. And that's where I got my background on being a Christian myself. And because we lived far away from most other kids my age, I became an extroverted introvert. So, what is that? All right, well, an extrovert's a person who is very outgoing and talkative. They're that person that's, life of the party kind of thing. So you go somewhere, they're the one that's always, they're in the middle of everything. They're the one talking to everybody. So an introvert, on the other hand, is the person that just sort of sits off to the side. They observe, they're real quiet. And so they're, like at a party, they'd be like the fly on the wall, just the wallflower, just sort of hanging out, checking out things that are going on. So for me, an extroverted introvert is someone who is quiet, shy, hangs out behind the camera, so don't have to talk to anybody. But when I have my group of friends, I'm probably a little bit on the obnoxious side, so Paul can say that. So I talk a lot when I get with my friends, but with strangers or people that I don't really know, it's real difficult for me to talk. So I had mostly A's and B's in high school. I actually am still taking college courses. I'm getting all A's. I worked for the same company for 23 years. I started as a desktop printer technician, so I repaired desktops and printers. And then I became a network engineer, so I actually connected thousands of computers across North America. Now I work in reporting, so I build websites for our actual internal customers and departments inside of our company. So basically, I'm a nerd. That's what it is. I'm a computer nerd. On the other hand, I lettered in soccer and volleyball. I had tons of friends in other sports, football and baseball. I hung out with that crew as well. Paula got me into CrossFit. So she started, was going for a while, and got me interested. So now I lift heavy things, and that's what I do. So I'm a jock as well. So it's sort of weird. A nerd and a jock. I hung out with both crowds, still do. I like Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Tron, and I've played Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a geek. So I'm like everything. I'm all over the place. I'm not just one group of people. I can find someone to hang out with and do something interesting with. So as a hobby, I'm a photographer. I take pictures on the side and take pictures just for fun, and that's just what I like to do. I love paddleboarding with my wife. So we actually go out on the lakes and paddleboard around for a couple hours and relax, and she's got me running, which is incredible because I've had 3 knee surgeries, 2 on my left knee, 1 on my right. And I actually didn't think I'd be able to run anymore. So I would hike and then I would hurt afterwards. And through her training, she actually got me, we run half marathons now. So that's 13.1 miles. At least, because we're slow, 2.5 hours of running. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my history. So this is, a little bit of what I have done, but not who I am. So my first wife catch that. My first wife I met in high school. So my high school sweetheart. We got married, had 2 children. So my son Harrison's 22, my daughter Cameron is 20. So that's a quick background on me. I'm going to fill you in a little bit more as the story goes on. So during summer camp, we talked about the Bible story of Samson. His story parallels my life in a lot of ways. Yeah, I pick things up, but I'm not like Samson. So we're going to do a quick reading of Judges chapters 13 through 16. So I'm no Bible scholar, but there's a point that I want to make. So we're going to maybe gloss over a few things. It's not going to be an in-depth thing. I'm just going to buzz through and get you going. So if you have your Bibles or your apps or whatever, Judges 13 is where we're going to start. So Judges 13, verse 1. So again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Philistines, who oppressed them for 40 years. In those days, a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan lived in the town of Zorah. A whole bunch of stuff there. His wife was unable to become pregnant, and they had no children. The angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife and said, "Even though you have been unable to have children, you will soon become pregnant and give birth to a son. So be careful. You must not drink wine or any other alcoholic drink, nor eat any forbidden food. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and his hair must never be cut. For he will be dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. He will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines." So the Philistines basically had the Israelites, and they attacked them anytime they wanted, stole from them, killed them. So they had these judges that God sent to help the Israelites. So who was Samson? So God visited Samson's parents through an angel and told them that they'd have a kid, and this kid would be a Nazirite. So this was amazing news because they can't have kids. Now Samson grew up living in the land that God gave to the Israelites. So God had to use men and one woman, and those were the judges. So what's a Nazirite? So now going back to summer camp, we went over this in some pretty good detail. I'm going to buzz through it real quick. So they had, among following the law, right? So the law of Moses, they had 3 extra rules on them. They could not touch a dead body, could not shave their hair, and they could not drink wine or touch grapes. So why couldn't they touch anything that was dead? They couldn't touch a body or anything that was unclean because the Nazirite was consecrated to God. It signified he was living a pure and divine life. He did not touch anything that was defiled or unclean. Death is the punishment of sin, and the Nazirite was to keep himself away from this aspect of mortality. So why couldn't he cut his hair? That's like an odd rule. I mean, Cody fit in, but you can't cut your hair. Hair gets long pretty quick. So it's to make them appear different, so they stand out from the crowd. Not shaving their hair would make them not focus on their outward appearance. What they cared more was the inward appearance. So how many of you worry about what brand clothes you wear? You know, what style haircut you have? Is, how your hair done? Is it popular? Do you have a weird haircut compared to anybody else? Is your nails done? The right shoes? All that stuff. That's all your outward appearance. So that was the whole point of not cutting your hair, ever. Imagine how long your hair would get after 20, 30 years of never cutting your hair, beard included. That's a hairy dude. So why couldn't they drink wine or touch grapes? Well, they should not only avoid getting drunk, but should even be more cautious by not drinking any wine at all. It's symbolic of self-discipline. and self-control. You had to have control over your desires. People usually at the time drank when they celebrated. So any kind of party they have, there's drinking going on. But with the Nazarite, the real rejoicing should be in the Lord. So he chose the Lord to be his joy and happiness. You don't make yourself happy by drinking, is really what it comes down to. So that they couldn't even eat grapes or touch them. That's just sort of weird. But it's about temptation. You stay away from temptation. Even though the grapes aren't wine, you're not going to get drunk from eating grapes. Grapes make wine. So it's the temptation. You're removing yourself from the temptation. The Judges 13:24. When her son was born, she named him Samson, and the Lord blessed him as he grew up. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him. So Samson grew up knowing all of the Nazarite rules. So he was raised a certain way. He wasn't just a regular kid. He was raised a certain way. So the story's going to actually make a jump. So the next chapter that we're going to go to is Judges 14. And we go from the end of 13 where he's born to 14 is Samson went down to Timnah, which is a town, and saw a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. So he went from being born to he's of marrying age. So 20 years. But that's sort of interesting. You know, he saw a pretty girl and said, hey, I want her as my wife. You know, you think about that. You know, maybe you want to meet someone first and not just go off looks, but not Samson. So his mother and father replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? Now, the reason why they said that is those weren't believers of God. They were outside the culture. And it was, at the time, they had to marry within themselves. So now he's breaking rules. So these aren't the Nazarite rules. These are the Moses rules that he's not following already. He sees a pretty woman, I want her. But she's not one that you're supposed to marry. Well, I want her anyway. So he argued with his parents and finally convinced them to let him marry her. So he went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. This is verse 5. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards them, or him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked it. All right, so let's break that down. So they're walking, they come to a vineyard. What's one of the rules of the Nazarite? No touching grapes. A vineyard's where you grow grapes. So he's breaking another rule. Now this one's a Nazarite rule that he broke. But what's interesting is he gets attacked by a lion. And he kills it, barehanded. That's pretty awesome. But then it goes on and says he didn't tell his parents about it. So what was going on is they're walking to Timnah to go get this wife that he's not supposed to have. He strays off the path. He leaves his parents. And then all of a sudden he gets attacked by a lion. So he didn't tell his parents about it. He went and saw the woman, liked her, and he says, sometime later, verse 8, he went back to marry her. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, the dead body of the lion, breaking another rule. And in it, he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. So now he's broken another rule. He's went off the path a second time, and he touched a dead body. I don't know about you guys, that's sort of nasty that you're going to pull honey out of a dead lion. You know, who comes up with that? That's pretty messed up if you think about it. You know, so this guy is raised, he's supposed to be the best of the best. He's supposed to be better than everyone else, and here he is breaking rules, and he's going to pull honey out of a dead lion. So he went and got married to this woman. And Samson held a feast. It was customary for young men. So basically they threw a wedding party. When the bride's parents saw him, they realized it's just him and his parents. So they got 30 men to be basically his groomsmen for the wedding. So like his best men. So now think about that. This guy's an Israelite. He has his own people. He didn't have any friends. He came through Timnah, whether no one went with him because they didn't want to, because they knew they shouldn't go, or he just didn't have friends. But the bride's parents gave him friends. Here's a bunch of people. Hang out with them. So Samson decides he's going to get a little cocky. He says, hey, let me tell you a riddle. If you can give me the answer within 7 days of the feast, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you have to give me 30 linen. Y'all can see this all cool. So Samson makes a bet with his groomsmen, these friends that have been given to him. He says, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. So for 3 days, the guys can't give him an answer. Well, this party's still going on. Well, what happens during parties at the time? I said it earlier. They're drinking. Or they're having wine. So again, he's breaking his vow. He's not supposed to be tempted. This is all around him. So this is 3 days so far. So on the 4th day, the men started pestering his wife. You got to get us the answer. You got to get us the answer. So she starts bothering Samson. He finally gives her the answer. She immediately goes to the men, gives them the answer. So on the 7th day, the last day of the party, 7 days. This part, a 7-day party, guys. That's a long party. I go for a party for a couple hours and I'm done. So they gave the answer to Samson. So the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to another town and killed 30 men, took their clothes, and brought it back and gave it to the groomsmen. Think about that. He went and killed 30 guys to get the clothes to pay this debt back. And he's a judge. He's supposed to be helping them, the Israelites. And he's just going crazy. So Samson dishonored his parents because he insisted. He got married without his parents' blessing. Many times we force our parents to agree with our decisions even though they are unwilling to bless them. How many times you strong-arm your parents into doing something? You just bother and pester them or whatever, so they're like, fine, whatever. Just, let's do it. That's what Samson did. So what you're doing is nothing new. It's not a surprise. Everyone's done it. People in the Bible do it. So even with all of this, God was merciful. And he transformed the situation into an opportunity for Samson to defeat the Philistines. So sooner or later, God delivers us to the consequences of our wrong decisions. We keep that in mind. So a person can make the wrong decision in their life, and God will defend them. But if the person doesn't learn once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times, God will let them be. And he has to bear the consequences of the wrong decision. So God's going to try and guide you. But if you keep pushing, I want to do it my way. I want to do it my way. I want to do it my way. Eventually God's going to be like, have at it. But you got to deal with what comes. So I don't believe I told you the title of my series, or my talk. It's part of the Be Free series. And it's be free from yourself. You have to let go of everything you want to do. Samson kept choosing to do what he wanted to do. And he was raised better than anyone else. But he still chose to do what he wanted to do. So with the same power that Samson killed the lion, you can discipline your weakness. Just think of that. When something happens that makes you angry, or you lash out at your parents, your brothers and sisters, or even your friends, you have the same power from God in you to defeat your weakness. So that same power God gave Samson is in you. But you have to tap into it. You have to choose that. And it's hard. Because we all have our challenges. We all have our problems. And it's hard to let God lead us instead of us choosing how we want to react. So just remember, when you're tempted to do or say anything bad, you have the power to overcome that. We're going to do a recap. So that was chapter 4 in a nutshell. So we're recap. So Samson dishonored his parents by forcing them to agree to the marriage. He strayed from the path of Timnah into a vineyard. He returned to Timnah, strayed off the path again. He married a foreigner of faith. She didn't believe in God. He went, after he killed the lion, he went back to it and got the honey out of it. Samson threw a party. And the party's not the issue. Celebration's not the problem. The issue was the wine. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to be tempted. He was arrogant about killing the lion. Look what I did. Not look what God did. Look what I did. And he made a riddle and a bet. And in the end of the story, he abandons his wife and goes back home because he's so mad. That's one chapter of this dude's life, and it's just about him getting married. This dude's had a rough go at it. But even through all of Samson's failures, God still blessed him. God didn't decide to use someone else. He worked through Samson even when Samson was breaking all of his vows. Don't ever think God doesn't have a purpose for you. Even if you're being rebellious and doing things that you want to do, remember, sooner or later you have consequences from the decisions you make that go against God. We're going to switch off Samson and come back to me. So I told you, got married to my high school sweetheart, had a couple kids. So the years passed, I didn't realize that the decisions from my past were catching up to me. I was going to make a whole new set of bad decisions. My first wife didn't believe in God. She went to church with me at first, but eventually going to church became a chore. I lost interest, and probably most of my faith. I quit going to church. It made things easier with my wife, but something was now missing in my life. I didn't know what it was. I didn't realize what it was. The differences in our beliefs started to drive a wedge between us. She lost respect for me. I lost respect for her. It was a downward spiral until we could barely stand to be around each other. Constant arguing, doing things out of spite to each other, just being mean. We both wanted out. We'd been married for 10 years at this point, and I was sleeping on the couch, and we had avoided each other as much as possible. So that's when my lion attacked. A woman began showing me interest in me and my weakness for what was missing in my life. I left my wife for another woman. By the way, woman is not Miss Paula. My justification was that we were better off apart. My life would be better. No more arguing, and no one's mad all the time. And, it was just horrible how we were with each other. And my thought was, you know what? This is the way to go. Things will be better. Wrong decisions. Adults aren't better people. Write this one down. Adults aren't better people. This is the part here. We just screw up in more epic ways. I mean, it's the truth. We have the ability to screw up on a level that you guys can't even imagine. That was me. So I'm here today despite my failures. I can look back now and see all the bad things I've done, and I've received the consequences of my decisions. Although I wish they hadn't happened or that I had done things differently, I wouldn't be here today without them. So I'll finish this story and we'll get back to Samson. Judges 15. So this is interesting. Judges 15 is Samson goes off the deep end. So he had gone back to his parents. He left his wife. So he was married for a week, got mad at the end, and left. Now, it doesn't say exactly how long, but within a year, he decides he's going to go back to his wife. So when he gets there, her father's like, hey, I thought you hated her, so I gave her to your best man. So, right? Now, if you sort of think about it, he left in a huff, didn't say anything, and just bailed out. So what were they thinking? They don't believe in God, so they're not going to find out what's going on. They're just like, well, let's marry her off for somebody else. And that's what happened. Samson freaked out. Absolutely lost it. So he gets mad, goes catches 300 foxes. Imagine, they're not hunting and catching 300 foxes. That's not like an overnight thing. Ties torches to them, lights the torches, and sets them loose. And they burn everything that the Philistines have. I mean, that's just insane if you think about that. Right? So he left his wife. They marry her off to somebody else. He gets mad, ties foxes together, burns everything down. That's maybe a little disproportionate on his response there. So the Philistines are like, who did this? And they said, Samson did it. So the Philistines got mad, found Samson's wife that was given to somebody else, grabbed her father, and burned them both to death. So that was the Philistines getting back for Samson burning all their stuff up. They burned his wife and his father-in-law to death. So Samson got mad at that and attacked the Philistines and just killed a ton of them. Just went and wiped a ton of them out. Doesn't say how many, but it says many. So then after he does that, he leaves and goes to live in a cave. And the Philistines regroup. They go over to the Israelites, and they're like, we are going to wipe you guys out. Give us Samson. So the Israelites are freaked out because they just have a ton of guys come over and just threaten them all out. So 3,000 Israelites go to Samson. 3,000 men. You got to think about it. 3,000 men. That's a lot of people. Go to Samson and say, hey, we got to get you to the Philistines. We want to give yourself up. So he says, all right, fine. But you can't kill me. They have to do it. So the Israelites say, fair enough. All right, so 3,000 guys rope up Samson, haul him over to the Philistines. So he gets over there. He's with the Philistines now. He breaks the ropes. So he has immense strength. He breaks the ropes that he's bound up with. And kills 1,000 of the Philistines. I mean, just wipes them out. One dude kills 1,000. Just imagine that. They came over for a fight. So they didn't just walk over. They came over with swords and everything. He kills 1,000 dudes. And he did it with the jawbone of a donkey. That's pretty crazy. So after he killed the Philistines, he was real thirsty and he cried out to the Lord. You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised, the Philistines? Then God opened up a hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. And Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So Samson led the Israelites for 20 years. So let's unpack that real quick. I'm going to bullet point this. So Samson's wife was given away. Instead of realizing the marriage was wrong, he became angry. But even in his anger, God used him. So Samson caught 300 foxes, tied them together with torches, lit it, burned up the Philistines. The Philistines turned around, burned his wife and father-in-law to death. Samson attacked the Philistines, killing a lot of them. The Philistines went to the Israelites and threatened them. 3,000 Israelites confronted Samson and talked him into giving himself up. And then Samson killed 1,000 men. Now remember, this is all because of a marriage that shouldn't have taken place to begin with. That's a lot of dead people. A lot of dead people. A ton of drama. So the path of destruction was all direct consequences of Samson making his own path instead of following God's path. Samson had continually broken his vows, but even in this, God gave Samson the strength to conquer his enemies. So although you have to face the consequences of your decisions, God will be there to get you through. You're not alone. God will not abandon you. When you let God work in your life, He will make the path you choose join back to His path. All right, so break from Samson. Back to this train wreck right here. So I ended up getting divorced. Later, I got married to the woman that I actually left my first wife for. Even though the divorce wasn't pleasant, things seemed to be going great. In fact, my new wife and I started going to church. Something in me changed. I reevaluated things I had done and how I got to be where I was. I began volunteering with the youth. I was in Awana. I don't know if any of you have heard of Awana, but it's the age group I was in was kindergarten through second grade. So I worked with little kids who were just starting to read. I joined Bible study groups. I found myself volunteering with church as much as possible. I thought I was on the right path. The consequences for poor decisions will always catch up with you. After 8 years, my second marriage started falling apart. Sometimes I look back and try and figure out what really made things start to break. And I can see a bunch of little things, but what stands out most to me, now that I can look back, is how the relationship started. God did wonderful things with the path I chose, but I needed to get back to his path for my life. And I eventually got divorced a second time. This time was different. I found myself at the bottom of the barrel. This time, instead of trying to make my own path, I allowed God to set me right. I learned who my friends were and who my friends weren't. And it was amazing to find out how many friends really weren't my friends. But I learned most to trust that God will make me whole. And I wasn't going to stumble blindly for the rest of my life. I vowed to never remarry. I mean, twice, good for three, right? I didn't even want to get seriously involved with anyone. But 9 months after my second divorce was finalized, my church's worship leader introduced me to Miss Paul. We first met at church. Things were completely different, and it was amazing. I was broken, but I finally put God at the center of my life, and He made me whole by giving me Paul. So Samson and I had a lot of the same issues. Samson refused to do things God's way, and he kept doing things the way he wanted to, breaking his vows all the time. I was the same way, but thankfully, I finally realized, after twice, that I needed to do things God's way, the way He wanted me to do it. My life isn't perfect. I still deal with consequences of past decisions. I still make poor decisions. And I know I would keep doing that until I die. I'm not perfect. I'm messed up and jacked up. And that's okay. Jesus was perfect, and that makes up for my failures. All right, guys. I know it's getting on. We're getting there. Last chapter, chapter 16 of Judges. So chapter 16 actually has almost two parts to it. The first part, Samson goes to Gaza. And he hooks up with a prostitute. I mean, come on. The guy knows everything he's supposed to be doing, and he hooks up with a prostitute. People of the town are like, dude, Samson's here. Let's kill him. But they're going to wait till morning. Samson stays till about midnight, and then sneaks out, but he grabs the city gates, rips them up out of the ground, posts and everything, hauls them up to a hill, and leaves them up there. That's the first part. Well, what's going on with Samson? Hadn't he learned his lesson? So he went from one wife, he went through this massive amount of killing, and now here he is again. And then it jumps from there and goes right to the next one. So sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the Valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So the rulers of the Philistines saw this, and they went to Delilah and were like, you got to get his secret. We need to know what makes him strong. So she started going to Samson. She's like, hey, tell me your secret. What makes you so strong? And at first he's like giving her, hey, it's bowstrings. Tie me up with bowstrings. I can't break them. He's lying. So she finds out. He breaks the bowstring. They tie him up and he breaks the bowstring. She's like, I can't believe you did that. So she does this 4 times. Trying to get him to tell him what makes him so strong. She pesters him and bothers him. And finally, he can't stand it. He says here, with such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. She finally gave in. So when she realized that he had actually told her the truth, she went to the Philistine leaders and said, this is it. They gave her a ton of money. So she woke Samson, she got him to sleep, she cut his hair for had someone cut his hair. And when she woke him up, it's like, the Philistines are coming to get you. And he's thinking, oh man, I'm going to tear him up. And he realizes he doesn't have God's strength anymore. So all this stuff that's been going on, God's finding a reason. You know what? It's time for you to deal with the consequences. You're choosing life your way. You know what? Have it. So God takes his power away from Samson. So the Philistines grab Samson and they gouge his eyes out. Not a pleasant thing. So you think of someone taking a stick or a knife or something like that and ripping your eyeballs out. Not cool. So they blind him. They bind him up with bronze shackles and make him grind grain. So basically like a giant, he has to move a giant stone and grind grain. And that was his punishment. So he's blind now. He can't see anything. So it's not until he gets to the bottom of the barrel. He's now had his eyes ripped out. He's a slave, if you will. He's a prisoner. They're making him do all his hard labor. He realizes, I'm not doing things God's way. I need to let God lead me. So the Philistines had this giant party. And they brought Samson out, basically to make fun of him. And as they had a servant bring Samson out, and he asked the servant, hey, can you put my hands on the pillars that hold the building up so I can run? This is one of the few times where Samson prays to do God's will as opposed to praying to God, God, I'm thirsty, give me something to drink. Makes it rain like crazy. Right? Floods the whole area. That was his first prayer. They don't talk about Samson praying at all. This guy's a judge. He's specifically for this. So they put him between the pillars, and he puts his hands on them. It says the temple was crowded with men and women, all of the rulers of the Philistines. And there were people on the roof, like 3,000 people on the roof. So this was not a small building. 3,000 people on the roof. So that doesn't include the count of everyone that's down on the ground, the leaders and everything. So Samson prayed to the Lord, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me once more. And let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my eyes. And Samson reached towards the two pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them. His right hand on one, his left hand on the other. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. He then pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people on it. In this one act, he killed more people than he did the whole time he was alive. So in his final act of asking God, give me strength, and God granting it to him, he killed more people than any other time. More than, to begin with, when it said he killed many, and then when they attacked again, and he killed 1,000. You know, this guy killed a lot of people. He killed more people in that one event. Samson continually broke his vows. First with the prostitute, then with Delilah. But God was there with him. In the end, even with all of Samson's bad decisions, God gave Samson strength to defeat the Philistines. But this came to the cost of his life. So where your consequences catch up with you, things you choose will catch up with you. Learn from your mistakes, bad choices. You have to stop the cycle of doing the same bad thing over and over. Samson made the same mistake 3 times with women. He just had a thing for pretty women. Think of the decisions you've made. Have you made the same mistake over and over? What you need to realize is God will give you the strength to overcome your weakness. But you need to recognize your weakness and let God guide you the right way. If you handle your weakness by yourself, you are limited. There's only so much you can do. But if you let God handle it, God is unlimited. There's nothing He cannot do. So Nicole and I have been married for 3 years now. She has an amazing son, Tyler. He's about to turn 18. And I love being part of my family. I'm far from perfect. My daughter doesn't speak with me. Because of things that happened in my second marriage that I didn't even know happened. And I still find myself making mistakes that I've made all my life. But Paula helps me recognize this. And each time I find it easier to let God guide me instead of trying to do things my way. I never prayed in any of my relationships before. And I would probably say I prayed rarely unless I needed something. God, let me pass this test. God, let me get here. The rain's bad. I don't want to die on the road. Those are my kinds of prayers. With Paula, that's different. Having the right person in your life that directs you back to God will give you everything you do so much more meaning. I know that God has a plan to bring my daughter back to me. But instead of trying to force it in my own way, I have faith God will do it. Find that person in your life that brings you back to God. If your friends encourage you to do things your way instead of God's way, they might not be your true friends. Just like Samson's religion. So, last set of lessons to learn, and we're done. See? We're right there. God allows us to make wrong decisions. He will not force us to follow and obey Him. Though God does not force us to obey Him, He can withhold His blessing and empowerment or strength when we don't listen to Him. We are never free of the consequences of our decisions. That's all the bad news. But God often works despite our rebellion. God is always there, even if we choose our own path. He will guide us back to His path when we let Him. And God loves you no matter how bad your decisions are. And He'll never stop loving you. So we need to learn to be free from our own choices, to force things our way. We want something to happen a certain way. We need to stop, step back, and realize God has a way. What does He have for us?